we are looking deeply into AI engine optimization, this new industry that popped up overnight and is suddenly incredibly vital to every marketing org. We are piloting a tool. We're looking at several others. It is kind of similar to the beginning of SEO, Google search, and that whole world, in the sense that we're just trying to understand the inner thinkings of an LLM and reverse engineer it, just like we did with the algorithm that produced search results, and then just hack it and show up in the right citations and generate content that answers questions specific ways and all of that. And I think every company has to pay attention to that. And if you're not, you're probably going to wake up one day and realize you needed to have done that months ago.
Hello and welcome to Best Story Wins. I'm your host, Josh, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jason. And today, our guest is Ari Yablok from Island. Hey, Ari, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, guys. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Ari.
Yeah, man. So for people that might not know who you are yet, or Island, would you mind giving us just a brief overview of what the company does? And then also, could you speak a little to what you focus on in your role there?
Yeah, so Island is this kind of simple but also crazily profound idea that is the enterprise browser. So pretty much all work is happening on a browser right now online. And yet the browser that we're all using to power all of our work, like across pretty much every major industry, is also the free software you downloaded from the internet that doesn't belong to you, where you're the product, not the customer, where the software is designed to track you and sell you ads and harvest your data, right? It's like the least work software you could think of, and yet it is literally the centerpiece of every workspace. And because of that, companies spend millions of dollars and hire entire teams and put crazy server farms in the back of their, headquarters just to power all these IT and security solutions that they need to make that free browser work for work. And it's a headache and it's frustrating. And when work went remote and when there's contractors and third parties involved and mergers and all kinds of crazy scenarios, like it gets way more complicated than it already is. And the two founders of Island, who were veterans in the enterprise software and even the browser space, Mike Fay and Dan Amiga, they just asked a simple question: what if the browser was actually designed for the enterprise? What if it included all of the access and network and obviously security and all the productivity and all the little things that work needs but doesn't have in the browser itself? What if it was built into the back end so it flowed naturally with everyone's work? And it literally changes the game. It makes the browser kind of this always on ultimate canvas for, I could make this whatever I need it to be. So, for contractors, instead of shipping them laptops with agents and VPNs and gateways on it to like protect your data, you just have them log into a browser within 2 minutes, and all the policies that you need to protect work and log them in automatically and kind of protect all passwords and all that's built in. So they get to work faster and smoother with nothing in the way, and the company actually keeps their data more protected and smooth and all. So it's a win-win across the board. So it's really amazing to see all of these huge companies, Fortune 10, 50, 100,000, all the major names you could think of, airlines, banks, hospitals, pharmaceuticals, retail, manufacturing, law, everything, kind of see, wait, this is what we needed all along. We just didn't know. And that was exciting. So the cool part is that I joined when it was just an idea, when it actually wasn't even called Island. I joined when I was working for a B2B tech branding agency in Tel Aviv, and this company was just an idea looking for a name. And I was given the privilege of working on finding that name. And the word Island, it wasn't immediately, but it was very early on in my R&D process of finding the right name was kind of like, yeah, that's it. Like this destination, this place where you're free, but safe, fundamentally safe at the same time, where you want to be there, where it's kind of cool to go to the island. It clicked in many different ways, and we could talk about that more if you'd like. But that's how I showed up. And what's cool is it was 9 months before we even exited stealth, so I got all this time to really dream up what we wanted this brand to be and how it would behave, how it would talk, how it would look. We really got to think very deliberately from the start about that, and I think that did a whole lot to get us to where we are today.
That's so cool. That's fun to have that overall arc and participation from the name stage when you're building out the brand and having that amount of time. It's like every brand team's dream. Doesn't always work out that way. But love to dive deeper into that. But before we go there, just looking back a bit, what's your overall origin story and what led you to, find your way into the world of brand?
Yeah, so I don't have a traditional career arc by any means. I kind of never had a job that existed before I showed up. I actually got my career started in nonprofit. I was working for a university with overseas students at a university here right outside of Tel Aviv, doing programming and student events and campus life and stuff like that. And I have a degree in social work. I kind of was going to be working with people. That was my thing. And a funny thing happened. I realized I needed to make money. And and I kind of had to look deep into, what I wanted to build from here. If I really need to deliberately kind of chart a path where I could be more financially stable and also pursue a career that excites me, what would that be? I was kind of at a crossroads between clinical therapy, which I was already dabbling in, which was my training, but also tech and kind of the marketing side of tech. Uh, Not anything I knew professionally, but I was always a gadgets guy, always kind of looking at the new tech that came out, even if it was just like the latest compact computer that excited me for some reason. And I was drawn to it, and I was given good advice, which is, when you're young, pursue tech because you could always be a therapist when you're older, right? So I pursued it, and I got my first job in a startup doing product content and working inside product teams where we were building experiences for users of mobile technology to kind of help them use their technology better. It was a company called Saludo, friends to this day from that company. And within my role there, I got put on several branding projects, and I kind of knew right when that started, I'm like, this is it. Like, this is my thing. My mojo is here, where it's like unpacking the essence of what something is. What is our core message? What are we trying to tell the world? How do we inspire people to want to come towards us? Which really felt more authentic and more human than kind of traditional marketing, where we're yelling at you and trying to get you to do an action for our benefit, right? I know I'm underselling marketing there, but that is how it felt to me. Like branding felt like just it's humans trying to put themselves out there to other humans, trying to unpack their identity, their essence. There was a lot of the psychology and human side of things that came from my training that attracted me to branding. And from there, I went on to that agency called Atreyo to be the head of brand messaging, where I worked on storytelling and end-to-end messaging and category naming, company naming, script writing, everything in between, where I would work closely with the VP strategy and the CEO there, Carmel and Shira, awesome mentors who I'm friends with to this day, working with CEOs and CMOs and startup founders and leaders to, again, dive into the essence of what they're building and why it matters and turn that into a compelling story that people can't ignore. And after 50, 60 of those, I kind of started to get good at it. And that's where Island showed up. And it was my chance to grab onto something that I really saw from the beginning, that even though right now it's just an idea, it could be massive. It could be world changing. And if there was ever a chance to build a brand that was instantly meaningful from scratch, that would be it. So luckily, the founders, Mike and Dan, agreed, and here we are.
So when you all were in the early days of starting the brand, um, doing that actual branding work, what was the original like idea that you wanted to kind of implant in people's brain, or what emotion rather did you want people to feel when they first encountered the company, and has this evolved over time at all?
To answer the second question first, for sure it's evolved. It's kind of strange to think of a brand that's not evolving. It needs to, because it's a combination of a company itself evolving and the product, and also the market conditions evolving, and that's just a constant. And we could get back to that, but that first point, this is what made it special. See, like, I was not into cybersecurity and enterprise. That was not where I saw myself landing. These are not known as the most exciting places for a brand person to work, right? Um, and yet this story felt significant, not just in terms of like the innovation of the tech itself, but a way to present enterprise tech in a refreshing new light, and to kind of show how this can be meaningful beyond just, selling product. And for us, there was a very important story to tell that the brand had the responsibility to do, which is, until now, there was such an overemphasis on surrounding the workspace with these solutions and tools, and there are entire industries that exist in cyber security and enterprise because that environment is not safe and not meant for work. And we challenge ourselves to tell our audience, what does your environment look like if it's designed for work from the start? If you're inherently secure, then you don't need to talk about danger or risk or threats or landscape. You don't need to use those words because you're not at risk. We could show our audience there's a new vocabulary. You could throw out the old vocabulary. You're not at risk. Stop talking about it, right? You're in the right place. It's a metaphor I like to use is, if you were throwing your 6-year-old's birthday party on a construction site, so you'd be running around telling kids to like put down that chainsaw and like don't fall into that hole, and your entire day would be consumed with running around trying to protect them from the dangers around. If you put it in the middle of a playground, you could just sit on the bench and scroll on your phone. You're fine, right? You don't need to talk about the dangers because you're in the right place. So we tried to show that if work is in its most natural environment, you are not at risk. You're free to just work. And we wanted that to be kind of the epicenter, or the foundation of our story. And we did that by showing, making the conversation very human and eye level, and getting rid of jargon, making the color scheme and kind of the vibe very not enterprisey, these deep greens and cream and sand and natural. Our booth experiences we could talk about, like at trade shows, was very atypical. It was kind of calm and serene. There were no walls or corners. It was just open space. All of that was an attempt to tell this early story of, you are where you're supposed to be, then you don't need to have the same conversations that you always have about risk and threats and security.
And I think it might be a little bit obvious now that you just mentioned it, but can you talk a little bit about that problem or tension that you're ultimately trying to solve with the brand, and like what gave you that conviction that, rather than maybe articulating or using that like fear type message, that like just creating the sense of calm was the right path to go down?
Yeah, it was certainly a risk. I mean, at the time, I felt very confident as, a brand person that if the story's told right, it will work. But we were certainly doing something that wasn't done, that wasn't, an obvious win, and that it's worth noting that there was a serious degree of risk that we were taking by doing that. And there were hesitations along the way. Why don't we just do this normally? Why don't we just talk the way others talk. This isn't how our audience is going to expect us to show up. And it came down to, and this is really, again, the credit of our CEO, Mike Fay, who is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life, could sell a tree stump to a forest. I don't know, I just made that one up, but like just brilliant, and kind of sees around corners, knows how to do things right. And he knew inherently from the beginning, if the conversation we have sounds familiar, then people will not understand that this is a completely new thing. People will not get that they have to get rid of their preconceived notions of what an enterprise environment looks like and what a browser is supposed to be. They have to be given signals, and this is an important word in this conversation. They have to be given signals that something new is here, and I have to remove all of the context that I assume matters, because it doesn't matter in this conversation. And brand is maybe the most effective mechanism in a business to send signals that kind of, in kind of by way of inception, kind of help you understand where you are, what kind of conversation you're having. And if it looked different, if it felt different, if the words were slightly new, even though I knew them, it was enough to help me understand, okay, you guys are doing something else. What is this? Tell me what it is. And we got that a lot. A lot of our early customers, a lot of those early conversations were people saying, I don't know what you guys do exactly, but I know I haven't seen it before. Show me what it is. And every time that happened, I said to myself, the brand is working. That's the brand at work, where usually when you're not sure of something, you kind of keep walking, right? But if you're not sure in a way that feels intriguing and inviting and signals to you that something special is happening, it's just not familiar yet, that's the right place to be, especially for a company that's building a whole new category and a whole new discipline around what a workspace should be.
So you've talked a bit about this idea that brands should feel experiential and not just be something that lives in the digital realm. What does that mean for you? And can you give an example of how you all have brought the Island brand to life in a more experiential way?
We doubled down on the idea of field events and meeting people in person. That was early on in our marketing strategy. It was initially for the very honest reason of when people had a 5-minute conversation with us, it had a 50% chance of going to a POC. It was that compelling just to have that conversation. And it was way more effective than some sort of one-pager or white paper or website, because they needed to kind of give themselves a few minutes to let it sink in that a browser is actually like the most important tool you have. And right now you're just using the free one, right? They needed to open themselves up to that. And the digital world is something where you're kind of making quick judgments and moving on. You don't really have that ability. So we knew that these in-person experiences would be important. And those were opportunities for us to, again, bring those signals to those experiences, not just the conversation, but the signals. So in our early big trade shows, conferences like RSA and Black Hat and InfoSec, these are the big enterprise software conferences around the world. So we had these experiences where, like I mentioned before, there were no walls, just 4 corners. There were demos that you could have, and some big immersive experience. Either up top, we had this big kind of curved dome one year, our first year at RSA, or we have a huge LED wall with just nature scenes that are perfectly curated around our story. Sometimes we would have an animator custom make a whole story for us in 3D of work being in its most natural environment. And we even added things like a scent diffuser to kind of, you smell like you're in a new place. We would add a few inches of padding to the carpet so that when you walked into our booth, it kind of felt different. It was squishier, it was comfortable, it was quiet. And what's interesting about trade shows is that usually the loudest booth wins. The loudest exhibition, whether it's loud in terms of color or noise or spectacle, those are the ones that tend to get the most eyeballs and noticed. And we went in the opposite direction, which is if you come here as kind of a breath of fresh air away from the noise, you'll understand immediately that that's our vibe. We're trying to help you get away from the noise, and the simplicity of Island as a brand value needed to not only be said, but it needed to be felt. So we also didn't have pretty much any writing on our booth. There was no like bullet points and all the, secure the future and work for tomorrow, all the taglines that you could see literally on every other booth. We got rid of that. And we wanted to go with a feeling and with intrigue. And in those early shows that we were at, we had people walking by, and this was early on in the life cycle of the enterprise browser as a category. So people didn't really know what it was yet. They stopped, they looked, they kind of smiled, sometimes took out a camera, their phone and took a picture, took one step in and said, "What do you guys do exactly?" And again, that was to me the signal of, if you're confused, you usually walk on. You usually say, "Not worth my time." But if you're confused in a good way because you picked up that something special and meaningful is happening here and I like it, then I want to give you my time. I want you to tell me what you're up to. And that was the vibe we were going for. And we've really carried that through Island internal events, through roadshow experiences we've had recently across Miami, Houston, Seattle, Dallas, all sorts of things that we've been doing to kind of bring that vibe outwards.
No, that's really cool. Yeah, I remember someone sharing with me at one point in time that like different is always good, but the difference between like different good and different bad, or different good and different confusing, is taste. And so it sounds like you guys figure something out here, something that resonates. And yeah, I could really see something that was done the way that you described it really resonating in your space, just because yeah, a lot of the companies look and sound the same. How does that connect with, when we were chatting a couple weeks ago, you were sharing with me that you are really hot on this concept of unreasonable hospitality. Like what is so interesting to you about that concept, and how does that kind of track with what you shared about the experiential part of brand building?
Yeah, it's funny that we were talking about that. This is something we've been having a lot of conversations about inside our marketing team and our sales team, that our attention to detail in the product is what's really gratifying to our customers, what's really valuable to them, where the idea of design for work, think about what that means. It's a product that exists. It's a product that works great as a browser. But we just thought of all the little and big things that matter to you and that apply to your specific day in the life at work. And we made all of those little adjustments so that it will be perfectly catered to your life. And we noticed that it wasn't just that the product was good or that it saved them money. It's that it felt personal to them. It was that it was theirs. It was their browser. It wasn't just the Island browser that they're using the way, we use a microphone, but it's not ours. It's just a microphone. It does the job, right? It became very personal, and the level of detail and the level of care that they felt was put into the product ended up becoming something we wanted to see, okay, where else does this apply? Where can we use this to our advantage? Because it's clearly the right recipe of going out of our way to make people feel like this is about them. And we have this as a philosophy on our R&D team. Oftentimes you'll see enterprise, especially enterprise software companies, where an R&D team is like in some other location, just people plugging away, right? Just coding. And everyone interacting with customers is the go-to-market and the business team, the sellers and the account execs. We have programmers and product managers and team leads, tech leads on calls, solving problems, literally building, based off a call, building a feature that could be done in days that addresses an issue they brought up on that call. And that's something only that you could only do if you have this philosophy of, this isn't just about building a product, it's about building their product. And that was, and what's funny is, to me, that is really part of brand. Brand isn't just, your website and your taglines and all that. It's a culture, it's a philosophy that we carry with us anywhere throughout the company, anywhere throughout, all these touch points. So we're bringing unreasonable hospitality, which is this famous concept that was, one of I think the number one restaurant at some point in New York, where they didn't just serve you great food, but they delivered this experience based on your unique needs. They did crazy, kind of borderline insane research on who you were, and brought you an experience that you couldn't have even dreamed of. And it was so delightful that you just couldn't help but feel like this was the best night out that you had. And I personally feel that a brand that isn't thinking, how do I get all the way to 99, 100% of deliberately thinking about every detail, then they're not really a brand yet. I've said it in a couple of different podcasts, like, everyone has the first 80% of a brand. Like, it's your website, it's the colors you chose, it's the words that go on them, it's your social media presence, it's all of those things that everyone has, because you don't not have them, you have them. It's that last 20% of, how am I going to talk in a way that no one else is going to talk, and I will be uncopyable? You will recognize me from the moment you hear me. How am I going to show up somewhere and you're going to know, oh, these guys showed up. Oh, that's the Island booth. If we took the logo off, would you still know it's us, based on the little things we do? And it's those details that really resonate, really stand out. And I'll even add that it goes such a long way internally with company pride and employee retention, and getting people to feel like, I am somewhere that matters. I'm somewhere where this level of thinking reflects how meaningful and how important this company is as a whole. I want to be somewhere like that. So the benefits are really even way beyond just dollars and cents or the fanfare or the hype that you get out of it.
Well said. Yeah, as you're talking a bit about the gravity towards kind of safety and messaging, even that you fought through and battled against, I know, part of that is rooted in good thinking, right? And some valuable things to prioritize, like clarity, and helping people understand. I really like your perspective, though, of creating this intrigue that's like interesting enough, even if it's a little less obvious, it's interesting enough that people actually want to know, versus like intentionally obscuring something and just leaving people confused and also disinterested, which is not really what you want to do, right? But why do you think with that, I guess, balance that B2B brands in particular need to strike, but really any brand, of like keeping things engaging and interesting, sometimes perhaps like taking a shot at being original in some way, while also like having people actually understand at some point what it is? Like, why do you think B2B brands struggle with that, and like creating experiences that actually really resonate with people?
How much time do we have? There are a lot of different answers to this question, and full disclosure, I don't think these struggles necessarily assign blame to any individual or any company not doing it the best they could, or even the entire industry. I think it's complicated. It's hard to do it really well. Any company, any B2B brand especially, that's excellent, has taken lots of risks and spent money that they could not justify in advance to do that. And that's just not common. And I don't think it will ever be common, in the sense that it will always be hard and will always be risky. I think the challenges are, people aren't spending their own money, they're spending their business's money, and they need to make it count. And especially in the venture-backed, fast-paced, revenue, high growth rate climate that everyone's in, more so now than ever before, where you really need to answer short term for the investments you're making, for how much impact your efforts are having, right? Brand is this amorphous thing that has the least, obvious results in the longest term, of any of the marketing efforts, at least, where doing one thing versus another is not obviously right or wrong, right? One of my favorite quotes about brand is Rory Sutherland, the famous Ogilvy marketing exec, saying the opposite of a bad idea. Sorry, the opposite of a good idea is also a good idea, right? I think that's the quote. I hope I didn't mess that up. But there's really no like obvious bad or good idea. It's just trying different things. Sometimes something terrible could be great, and something great or obvious could be terrible. So it just makes the craft of it inherently challenging. It's more of an art than a science in comparison to the rest of marketing and business. So it's just, again, inherently hard to say I'm doing it right or wrong. You just have to take a lot more risks. And I think in the business world, people are more inclined to do things that have already been done successfully and to mirror success as opposed to create new success. Now, the irony is the heart and soul of entrepreneurship is paving a new path, is, going somewhere no one's gone before because you think everyone else is doing this thing wrong. So like the very essence of what it means to build a product from scratch and to, break into a market is the same DNA as building a brand and doing it boldly and taking risks. I just find that some founders and leaders inherently get it and invest in it, and some aren't as open to it, at least at first. Let's leave it at that.
Shifting gears a little bit, I know some people out there are using AI these days. Perhaps you've heard of it. How have you been? It's kind of gone through a funny, kind of like wonky adoption cycle. I mean, it's unique to each company, right? But there was like certainly an accurate but still kind of cope vibe to people just being dismissive at first, and it was like we assured ourselves by just laughing at how bad like AI videos were or things like that, right? And then now we're kind of entering this phase where it's like, oh wow, that's getting like indistinguishable from human created content in a lot of cases. With all that in mind, how are you thinking about this, or how have you already worked AI into creative workflows in marketing content or strategy? How do you weave it in?
Yeah, I'm experimenting a lot in all kinds of ways because I think maybe one of the most challenging but also exciting things about AI is like it's such an open space. Like the whole promise of AI is do anything you could think of, just faster and easier and quicker and sooner, right? So there's no kind of rule of like here's how you do it, or it's just a whole bunch of people discovering it as they go. I think probably the most exciting posts that pop up on my LinkedIn feed are people that figured out some new way to use AI that they didn't realize is possible. And I love that. And I think that's how it should be. I do think there's some interesting ramifications specifically to brand, if we're going to keep it a brand conversation, that AI is having, both kind of practically and also conceptually. So like practically, we're seeing a fundamental shift in behavior where people aren't going and seeking out sites and products and brands, but they're having AI bring it to them and not necessarily leaving the AI interface, in which case you may never encounter the brand that you end up buying from because you're just having a conversation with AI and then doing your research there and then making your decision there. And it leads people like me to question, to ask themselves, okay, how are we going to make sure our brand represents some sort of advantage if there's way less of an opportunity to be encountered, at least in the digital space. And by the way, one of those answers is don't think digitally anymore the way we thought the majority of our world is digital. I don't know if you saw a recent campaign by Anthropic, the makers of Claude, one of the bigger AI companies, but they did this pop-up store in New York City. They took over a store and just were giving out merch that just says "Keep thinking" on a baseball hat. These aren't like profound items that you couldn't get anywhere else, but it was theirs, and it was branded, and it was cool, and it was real life humans. And there were lines out the door to just walk in and get a free hat. And obviously they had a huge social campaign based on it, which is the added benefit of a real life brand experience. But it was also kind of an indication of, think about it, the AI brand thought it would be a good idea to have a human experience on a street corner in New York City. What do they know that we don't? Like, maybe that's where brands will start living more and more, just go back full circle to where we started, where people had to interact with people for the brand to get stronger. And I think that's interesting, kind of one of the fallouts or one of the intended or unintended consequences of AI, eating up our digital world. But going to the other side of it, as an ideas guy, my job is essentially to think of original ideas. The hardest part is to get from a good idea to a thing you could press play, or you could show people, or hold, or whatever it is. And AI has this amazing ability to turn an idea into a real thing, or at least a prototype, that hour, that half hour, and that's just black freaking magic. I don't, it's brand creators are kids in candy stores with this stuff, if not for anything else, but for selling ideas more easily, making sure they're viable before we go invest in going all out on a whole campaign. Oh, that's what that could look like. That's just an amazing thing that didn't exist before, that I'm doing a lot more of just testing out more and more ideas to my own eyes and to my team's eyes, and to just see what we're looking at and what it can be like. And another area is adding strategy and structure to things. Every research has been obviously a major superpower of AI. I don't need to talk to that end, but I do think there is kind of a gap often on the strategy side. There's a lot of making things. There's a lot of putting content out there and kind of shooting your shot as fast as you can, and fail fast and learn. There's often this strategy step that's skipped of, what are we going for? Who are we talking to? Why is this going to work? What's the unique superpower that this asset or that this approach has, that we could tell ourselves this has what it takes to win? And AI can be an incredible tool, not only in helping you build a strategy, but also sharpening it and showing you what it shouldn't be, and being a critic for you. A lot of times I use AI to criticize ideas and help me throw out things that I shouldn't be doing, or that don't make sense. So we're just scratching the surface on that. I mean, I'm in the middle of working with one of our VCs on like creating a proprietary AI content creating engine that's going to do all these interesting workflows that will speed up work. That's really about the productivity side of it. And that's exciting. And every month there's some new tool that makes everything I just worked on, unnecessary, and and the fun stuff like that. But I really think the thinking part, which the thinking and the bringing an idea to life, that's really just the most exciting part of it to me.
Obviously, everyone's talking about the LLMs now, and what that means, what they mean for, for brand and discoverability and so forth. How are you all thinking about how your content will need to change, um, with respect to like how you build your brand? Because, for the longest time, I think this is like a Jeff Bezos quote, but people have latched onto this idea that brand is what people think and say and feel about you. But now it's becoming more like brand is what people say, think, and feel about you, but also the LLMs, right? And so how are you all like just approaching um, brand building, knowing that there's this layer between you and the end customer? Does that play a role in how you think about it? Or is it more just like, we're going to keep doing what we're doing and we're just going to trust the process?
Yeah, I mean, we are looking deeply into AI engine optimization, right? This new industry that popped up overnight and is suddenly incredibly vital to every marketing org. Um, we are piloting a tool. We're looking at several others. It is kind of similar to the beginning of SEO and Google search and that whole world, um, in the sense that we're just trying to understand the inner thinkings of an LLM and reverse engineer it, just like we did with the algorithm that produced search results, and then just hack it, right? And then show up in the right citations and generate content that answers questions specific ways and all of that. And I don't think any of that is, I think every company has to pay attention to that. And if you're not, you're probably going to wake up one day and realize you needed to have done that months ago. And that's all fine. For the very simple purpose of, there will be plenty of people who the first and maybe most important step in their research, the minute they have the intent to buy a certain software, and if it's in your industry, they're just going to ask their most trusted LLM, I need to buy software X. What's the best one and why, right? And if you're not showing up, then you have a problem. And I think that's a worthy cause on its own to pay very close attention. But I also think that besides the brute force game of just showing up as much as possible or answering questions the right way with the right keywords or citations, I also think that's what makes brand at the same time more important than ever, because people are going to either not know any brand and then just rely on whatever the LLM tells them because they just don't know who the players are, or they don't have any particular feeling one way or the other what the best choice is. But imagine if they already knew one of them, or they liked one of the choices way better. How much easier it would be for them to want to arrive at you to begin with. And that didn't really change just because LLMs showed up. That's just a truth about brand. It's one of the ways that I like saying it. It's kind of a funny phrase, is it's the feeling of knowing, right? Which kind of doesn't make sense, because if you know, you know, but you don't really know what the answer is, even when an LLM tells you, or your best friend tells you, or the CEO of, Microsoft tells you, whatever. You don't actually know if it's going to work for you, whatever you're buying. You're just trusting all of the input that you're getting, that it tells you enough to say, I think I know. Brand does a great job of giving you the feeling of, I know these guys are going to work. I know this is the right choice. And if you can surround someone's buyer journey with your brand and all of the ways that it's always worked, but maybe even more so outside of digital and in ways that are less conventional. We're exploring direct mail now. We're exploring things that go, way back to the pre-digital days. Then you will inherently have an advantage. And I think that's an important thing. So really it's about both levels. You can't not deeply investigate what it means to optimize your search results on an LLM. You have to do that. At the same time, it also means that showing up outside of an LLM is even more important, because you don't want them to rely on just whatever that chat answer is and just hope that they see you. You want them to prefer you beforehand.
Yeah, that's good.
I love that. The feeling of knowing. Do you have a trademark or slogan mark on that?
Patent pending. Yeah.
Yeah. You have your book title, at least. I really like that a lot. So what's something I love that you mentioned also, or you talked about that as kind of like a perpetual truth, right? And I'm curious, like when you think about this, you're talking earlier a little bit about this almost like counter movement, and that's one of my favorite things, or like the Anthropic ad about thinking like you see it with fast fashion, fast food, where it created, counter movements of appreciating, handmade items or, you know, farm to table. you know, uh, I'm really excited just, or even like the growth and resurgence of vinyl again, uh, I'm really excited to see what that counter trend becomes with AI, right? That sees a resurgence. And so I'm curious with that in mind, what's something about the work of brand building and just your overall craft that you really hope never gets fully automated, or at least, some analog aspect of it, or old school aspect of it, just like has the same value or even more value than ever in the future?
That's a great question. Um, in the beginnings of this AI, this iteration of the AI revolution of ChatGPT and the other LLMs, I was convinced that it would never get to a point where it could write something or ideate something that would make me feel genuinely jealous, like I couldn't have thought of that. And it happened already more than once, and I'm like, damn, I thought we had that, advantage, and we wouldn't give up that advantage of just being better thinkers, but they're pretty good thinkers, pretty good creators. Claude with words blows my mind. I'm just upset every time I use it because how did it get this good? Um, Upset in a good way. um, and I think maybe one interesting angle to answer your question of like, what's the one thing I hope we keep, and I'll elaborate on this for a minute, is imperfection. Like the biggest disadvantage or the biggest weakness that LLMs have right now, or Gen AI in general, the multimodal, like across photo, video, anything, is they're not good at being imperfect. They're almost incapable of being imperfect because they assume that the right answer is the perfect answer, right? So, and even when you tell it to be counterintuitive, right? Think of something you haven't thought before. And I've done lots of exercises with naming things, naming products and companies, and kind of original creative campaigns. It never allowed itself to be truly irresponsibly imperfect, like to think about something it should not have been thinking of in order to get to a new idea. It was always kind of logically, or the line of thought made a lot of sense. And I think that's where we could still win as a race, as a civilization, where it's often not the perfect answer is often not the right answer, and the perfect creative asset, the perfect story, isn't the right story. The messy means human. Messy means there's something real, and that's going to be the last thing that's not commoditized, probably. I just saw someone wrote, I don't even remember where I saw this, that like the next great social media platform will be the one that is human only, and you will pay to be sure that there are only humans talking to you. And that will be like the great value that you will get, because every other digital interaction will be swarmed by non-human entities delivering you what you want, right, in the perfect way. So I think that's where brands could go. And interestingly, if we take this to a B2B and an enterprise level, which is the world I work in, there is kind of an extreme desire to present ourselves perfectly, and to make sure we don't show up anything less than, premium and elite, and totally refined. We don't want to risk, any sort of second guessing or anything like that. And it may over time start to work against us. It may start to create a barrier as opposed to be inviting to our customers, and allowing some vulnerability might end up being what the best brands become really good at over others over time.
That's solid, man. I agree. Ari, we're at time right now, but this has been awesome. And I feel like we could talk for a couple more hours, but I know it's late there where you're at. For people that want to learn more about you and find you online, where's the best place for them to do so?
The two best places are my LinkedIn profile. When I have enough time, I try and dump my thoughts there. And whatever you're seeing Island doing creatively or on LinkedIn or other social platforms, I probably had some degree of input there, and I'm pretty proud of what we're creating and what we're building, with some lot of cool new stuff to come. So definitely check that out. I would love to hear your input on what you like and don't like. I do have a podcast myself called Believe in Brand, where I have conversations very similar to this with thought leaders and marketing leaders on the art of branding in this day and age, and some brand new episodes coming out soon. So excited about that too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ari.
Thanks, Ari.
Thank you guys. This is great.